Good morning, welcome to CATEX-TV. My name is Frank Fortunato. This is a live broadcast from Princeton, New Jersey. Today is Monday, February 7th, 2011. It's 11:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time in the U.S., 4:30 p.m. in London, 12:30 in Bermuda, and Mexico City, 10:30 a.m. If you need to reach us during the broadcast, you can phone in toll-free at 1-866-67-CATEX overseas. Our AOL instant mail address is CATEX-TV. We will go right to today's news. Here's Joe Brandon. Joe Brandon is a friend of ours. The former Gen Re CEO was forced to resign amid growing pressure from American regulators over a controversial finite reinsurance transaction with AIG. Well, the Securities and Exchange Commission recently sent what is known as a termination letter to Joe Brandon. In connection with that investigation, this means that he will not be charged with any civil action in the case, much less any criminal violation. It's vindication for Mr. Brandon. It's also a blow to the prosecutorial style made famous by Eliot Spitzer. Mr. Buffett had been under pressure from Mr. Spitzer to sack Mr. Brandon as a form of extrajudicial punishment. Mr. Buffett responded by saying that his heartfelt praise for Mr. Brandon's management of Gen Re continued even after he was forced to step down. Once again, it indicates that Mr. Buffett's office has referred reporters to previous public statements that Buffett has made applauding Mr. Brandon and his abilities. The question is how can Joe Brandon get his reputation back? Hopefully he'll get it back very easily and very quickly. He's one of the good ones and we wish him the best. Aon came out with their numbers on Friday. It saw their 2010 net income dip 5% to $706 million on revenues that had increased. The revenues were up to $8.5 billion. They're continuing to assimilate their nearly $5 billion acquisition of Hewitt Associates, the human resources group. Aon posted $733 million in income from continuing operations. It swung to a loss of $27 million from a gain of $111 million in its discontinued operation. Its ongoing broking business generated commissions and fees of $6.4 billion, marking an increase of 1%. It had flat organic growth. In the UK, apparently their retail brokerage fell, their revenue fell 3% to $629 million from $650 million in 2009. All in all, not too surprising given the flatness and dropping of certain reinsurance rates and other commercial rates. The London syndicate Beazley has begun to write environmental liability from its box at Lloyd's. Nick Pearson joined Beazley last summer from XL, working in Philadelphia as a senior underwriter for environmental coverage. He's now moved over to London. It's the natural next step, they say, in the development of a global environmental offering. Beazley said that North America and Canada remain the initial target regions for the business, as these remain the most mature markets for environmental liability cover. Chaucer is in the news too. The other Lloyd's syndicate talked about today has formed a coverholder partnership with Coastal Marine Services, CMS, to write hull and machinery and protection and indemnity risks on behalf of Syndicate 1084. Under the new coverholder agreement, Coastal, a newly formed marine underwriting agency, will transfer its book of business of more than 400 H&M and P&I clients to the new partnership. The new partnership will be managed by Phil Graham, class underwriter for marine hull and liability at 1084, and David Tiney, director at CMS. Well, we've talked a lot about Solvency II, and really over the past couple of weeks there's been an outcry as insurers begin finally to dig their heels in. Richard Banks has a front page article at Insurance Day today. This is pretty interesting. It's a question of whether this is real or these are just people grumbling as the events finally seem to take its ultimate course. I don't know. Banks writes that further evidence has emerged of the real concerns among European insurance groups about how Solvency II is being implemented. This time he goes to MAPFRE. He's talking to Esteban Tejera, their general manager in London. Mr. Tejera is adding his voice to those expressing anxiety about Solvency II. Tejera said that the philosophy of Solvency II is fine. He said MAPFRE is prepared and ready to go. He also stressed that Spanish regulatory authorities are making good progress with the Solvency II implementation, but he hinted that they might need more time. He said this won't be a problem just for Spain. He said it's a general problem. The situation for Solvency II, says Tejera, is not so rosy for other players. He said, my concern, because I've worked in the sector for a long time, is that the regulation is too sophisticated and the implementation will become too difficult. This could represent a challenge that's difficult to cope with for small and medium-sized insurers in Europe. He expressed frustration companies running a good business could find themselves facing difficulties in reporting their solvency levels and pointed to the huge amounts of correspondence emanating from the European authorities on the regulations. Tejera said, you can't expect every businessman to manage an exercise in which he receives from the European Supervisory Organization a volume of 700 pages and measures to implement within 3 weeks. Tejera is the latest prominent European insurance figure to complain about this. It all began last summer when Dennis Kessler, the CEO at SCOR, began to talk about the Solvency II approach to investments. They, of course, impose a high capital charge on companies with capital investments in inflation-safe forms like shares and real estate. Kessler then said the latest version of Solvency II is the best way to move the insurance industry toward a big mess. Last week, of course, the Germans erupted with their concerns about the latest test run for the 5th quantitative impact study. George von Furstenwerth, the chairman of the GDV management group, that's the Association of Medium and Small-Sized German Insurers, said that the documentation was faulty and difficult to understand. The main documents were in English only. They only arrived 2 weeks before the deadline. Not even mathematicians could understand the documents, and many of the formulas were incorrect. I suspect this is just grumbling as people have to finally get their houses in order. The stock market in New York is up about 82 points right now. We'll go to a word from our sponsors. Quick update on Cairo. For the 14th day now, protesters are occupying Cairo's Tahrir Square. They're showing no signs of being appeased by talks held earlier today between the government and opposition groups. Economic life apparently is slowly returning. A number of the banks are open again. The government of Egypt sold international debt on the international markets, although did not sell as much as they wanted. The curfew in many Egyptian cities is still in effect. It's been somewhat shortened, but it's been largely ignored. The Egyptian stock market is set to reopen for trading this coming Sunday. The stock market's been closed since January 27th. So we'll see what happens there. An explosion at a pipeline in Egypt that supplies natural gas to Jordan and Israel has been blamed on a gas leak. This is according to the country's natural gas company. Earlier reports suggested that sabotage had been behind the blast, which occurred on Saturday. The gas company said that a small amount of gas leaking in the terminal at the pipeline that runs through the El Arish area in the northern Sinai desert caused the explosion. However, a local security official is still saying that an explosive device was detonated inside the terminal. Jordanian officials were scrambling over the weekend to rearrange power supplies after the Jordanian route that led up to Amman was damaged by the explosion. The branch that went to Israel was not damaged, and the Israelis experienced no power interruptions. In Bangladesh, normal life has ground to a halt in the capital of Dhaka and other key cities following a general strike called by Bangladesh's main opposition party. Thousands of riot police are patrolling the streets of the capital. Schools and businesses have been shut. The nationwide strike was called by the Bangladesh Nationalist Party. It's disrupted transportation services. They accuse the government of failing to regulate the country's capital market, which recently suffered a sharp fall, fueling violence. In Romania, 5 miners were killed in a coal mine explosion Saturday in the western part of the country. A coal mine in the town of Uricani saw 5 coal miners who were servicing an electric transformer killed when a blast occurred. The coal mine employs 800 people. It's one of the oldest in Romania. It's due to be shut down by 2018. And in Ohio, several railroad tanker cars carrying volatile chemicals continued to burn last night after a freight train derailed and caused an explosion in northwestern Ohio. No injuries were reported after about 30 cars on a 62-car train derailed in a rural area about 50 miles south of Toledo, Ohio. About 8 cars, each carrying about 30,000 gallons of ethanol, exploded and caught fire early yesterday morning. And all 28 cars were burned in the fire. The train was heading from Chicago to North Carolina and loaded with ethanol. This is according to the Norfolk Southern Group, the railroad. They have no information as to what caused the derailment. And in Australia, these people can't catch a break. This time it's in Western Australia. Firefighters are battling 2 wildfires, water bombing them from above. At least 40 plus homes on the outskirts of Perth have been destroyed, as 4,000 acres of forested land have been razed. This picture here shows residents who were evacuated. They're not allowed to return to their homes. They met in this hall to learn the fate of their homes. Authorities listed addresses and read out damage reports, sometimes breaking the news of 100% destruction to property owners. That's terrible. Well, last night it finally ended. After 7 months, the National Football League season is over. Thank goodness. In 1 week, the baseball spring training camps opened. But last night it was this man's night. Aaron Rodgers was named the MVP of the Super Bowl 45. He's the quarterback for the Green Bay Packers. The Green Bay Packers defeated the Pittsburgh Steelers 31-25. The game was held in Dallas, Texas, in front of 102,000 spectators. There were many, many famous people in attendance. Former President George W. Bush, former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice. It was quite an event. I've already spoken to a number of people in London who actually stayed awake to watch the whole thing. God bless them. I went to bed at the end of the third quarter. But thank God the season's over, and at least that's a sure harbinger of spring. For as long as they're still playing football, you know, spring is long, long, long off. So at least that stopped. If we have any other breaking news, we'll come back and tell you. In the meantime, thank you for watching.